had recently recorded a video about AMD performance in 3D Coat because 3D Coat utilizes an Intel compiler for its CPU multithreading. And in the past, that had been an issue. And what I was attempting to do was to demonstrate that this issue has seemingly been resolved. And what I was doing was using the frames per second indicator in the lower left portion of the screen in the status bar to help indicate how well the CPU was performing. And since then, I have stumbled upon a feature that was somewhat hidden in 3D Coat, and I wanted to go ahead and share that with the user base now. And that is the frames per second monitor. It's an additional way to view the frames per second in 3D Coat. Let's go to the Windows menu under the Panels option, and then we will click on Frames per Second Monitor. So I'll click on that, and we can leave it in the viewport. Let's scale it perhaps. And we can get an idea of how well our system is performing because it reveals not only the performance of the graphics card, but it also reveals CPU performance, because if there is a bottleneck with the CPU, then the graphic card has to wait on the CPU in order to perform its task. For example, here in the Sculpt workspace, in the Sculpt Tree panel, if my layer is in surface mode, indicated by the S icon here, then I have an option to remove stretching. What that's going to do is perform a secondary calculation, and it's going to perform it at the end of a brush stroke. When I am brushing here with the clay brush, at the end of that stroke, you'll notice how it dips here in the graph. Okay, and there's a little pause at the end that you'll feel. It depends on how dense your model is. So if your model is in the hundreds of thousands, or maybe 1 to 2, 3 million or so, then the performance may be happening in real time, so it's not noticeable. But if it's a relatively dense model, like this one is, then the pause at the end of the stroke will be more noticeable. When I turn that off, you won't notice this dip because it does not have to perform that secondary calculation. Another thing to keep in mind is when you don't need to use wireframe, make sure to turn it off because it places a heavier load on your graphics card, and you will see that reflected in your frames per second. I'm going to hit the W key, and you will notice in the frames per second monitor how the frames per second increases significantly. Now you'll notice that as I'm brushing, the number is somewhere between 50 and 100. And in that range, you will typically not feel or notice any lag as you are working. It's when the frames per second drops below 50 that you will start to notice it. It drops off now because 3D Coat is auto-saving. Okay, so you can dock it wherever you like. And that's going to conclude this look at using the frames per second monitor in 3D Coat. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.